Welcome back, viewers, to Body Unified Flow. I'm your host, Dr. Murray Muthu, and this is where we simplify complexity to amplify your performance. Today, we're tackling the absolutely crucial best practices of the project definition and initiation phase, specifically focusing on the needs assessment and the business case. We're going to talk about conducting a rigorous needs assessment to define your objectives, scope, and strategic alignment before any design is authorized. We'll explore how to build a business case that includes the total cost of ownership, the benefit-cost ratio, risk exposure, and strategic fit, and why it all needs an independent review. Plus, we'll look at defining project success criteria as measurable, smart KPIs, and finally, how to secure that all-important written owner or client endorsement. In today's explainer, we're going to equip you with the exact tools you need to finally transition away from gut-feel decision-making and move toward a highly data-driven, strategic framework for project initiation. Now, we all know that stepping away from gut instinct is notoriously difficult in traditional corporate environments, right? We've all seen charismatic leaders push their own pet projects forward based on pure intuition, completely skipping the hard math. Well, today, we're going to change that. We're going to master the rigorous needs assessment, build a literally bulletproof business case that accounts for the entire life cycle, define multidimensional, smart KPIs that go way beyond just time and budget, and finally, lock down the precise protocols for securing a written project endorsement. Sound good? Let's dive right in. So here's our quick roadmap for today's masterclass. 1. Bodhi Unified Flow Initiation. 2. Rigorous Needs Assessment. 3. The Strategic Business Case. 4. Defining Smart Success Criteria. And 5. Securing written endorsement. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Bodhi Unified Flow Initiation, the absolute foundation of project success. When projects fail, and whether that looks like a massive cost overrun or just a total failure to deliver the intended benefits, it almost always traces back to poor scoping. Skipping this initiation phase makes it significantly harder for a project to deliver on time and address what your stakeholders actually need. To put this into perspective, think about the cost of making changes. If you make a 10% change in design during this upfront initiation phase, it might cost you a few hours of engineering time. No big deal. But making that exact same 10% change during the construction or execution phase, that could literally cost you millions of dollars and set the project back by months. This is exactly why structured methodologies like Prince2 and PMBOK absolutely insist on a formal green light decision before you allocate any major planning or execution resources. Simply put, if a project doesn't start correctly, it's statistically unlikely to finish successfully. Moving right along to Section 2, Rigorous Needs Assessment, the prerequisite for design. Now, here's what's actually really fascinating about identifying your organization's true needs. You have to force yourself to look past these surface-level symptoms. A rigorous needs assessment systematically evaluates the gap between your current state of affairs, what we call the as-is state, containing all your current deficiencies, and your desired to-be future state. The crucial takeaway here is that we are strictly defining objectives that directly respond to verified needs, not just subjective preferences. You have to know exactly what gap you're trying to close, and you need the empirical evidence to back it up. So, how do we avoid that subjectivity? Well, we rely on some pretty robust analytical frameworks. First, we use root cause analysis, like the 5 whys technique. This means systematically asking why until you isolate the fundamental defect, ensuring we're curing the disease, not just treating the symptoms. Then we use SWOT to make sure the project intent actually aligns with organizational strengths. For macro-environmental scanning, practitioners lean on PESTLE to evaluate any external regulatory, economic, or social risks to the project's viability. And in highly technical spaces, we use the Design Area Scope table. This helps us logically pinpoint the processes that will deliver the absolute highest business payback. That brings us to Section 3, the Strategic Business Case, your financial and strategic justification. Okay, so once the need is verified, you've got to justify the investment with a strategic business case. This is the central document that moves the conversation from intuition to hard quantitative evidence. Rigorous financial analysis is the cornerstone here, and we absolutely must start with the total cost of ownership. This is a holistic financial estimate that determines all direct and indirect costs associated with an asset throughout its entire life cycle, from the moment you acquire it all the way to disposal. We really have to look past the initial purchase price to avoid what's known as the acquisition trap. That's when a supposedly low-cost purchase ends up causing skyrocketing hidden operational expenses that completely wipe out your original business justification. And this number brilliantly illustrates why looking at the whole picture is absolutely crucial. Up to 75% of an asset's total cost occurs during the operation and maintenance phases, long after the initial build is finished. Think about that for a second. If your business case only looks at the upfront capital expenditure, you are literally ignoring 3/4 of the actual financial reality. That 75% includes things like 30 years of expensive software licensing renewals, massive HVAC energy consumption, facility management staffing, routine maintenance, and eventually, decommissioning. You've got to account for the whole shebang. Now, to rank viable alternatives when you're under a tight budget, we calculate the benefit-cost ratio. This is a fundamental metric that compares the total present value of benefits to the total present value of costs. And when I say present value, I mean discounting future cash flows back to today's dollars. Because let's face it, a dollar earned 10 years from now is mathematically worth a lot less than a dollar in your pocket today. Any metric greater than 1.0 gives your executive sponsors quantitative evidence of positive economic value. It proves that your assumptions reflect real market conditions, inflation, and even indirect gains like risk avoidance. But hey, it's not just about the finances. We also evaluate strategic fit using what we call the better owner lens. This is a really fascinating comparative test. It asks, why is your specific organization, rather than one of your competitors, uniquely positioned to create the most value from this project? We need to ensure the project actually leverages your unique corporate capabilities. That might be a lower cost to serve, superior distribution networks, or maybe stronger regulatory relationships. We often map this out using adjacency mapping to thoroughly understand the execution risk and strategic alignment. And listen, just doing a simple qualitative risk assessment, like slapping a high or low label on a risk, is completely inadequate for high-stakes projects. We must mathematically quantify our risk exposure. The total project cost formula incorporates the base cost, the expected risk impact, and a calculated risk premium. Now, to get this premium, we use range estimating and Monte Carlo sampling. In plain English, instead of relying on one static guess, a computer runs a simulation of your project thousands of times, using random variables. This gives us the exact statistical probability of coming in on budget, allowing us to establish contingency reserves based on incredibly high confidence levels like P80 or P90. To completely eliminate that dangerous optimism bias, best practices actually mandate an independent project review before you get final sanction. This involves stepping through 5 totally unbiased milestones. First, establish clear terms of reference. Next, collate the necessary evidence from the project team. Following that, an independent review team evaluates any compliance gaps. Then, you host an integrated project assurance review day. And finally, the team issues a final report with date-assigned actions. This kind of objective assessment ensures the project is genuinely primed for success before any massive capital is deployed. All right, moving to Section 4, defining SMART success criteria and going way beyond the iron triangle. Modern project management absolutely requires multi-dimensional SMART KPIs. We have evolved way beyond the old iron triangle of just cost, time, and scope. Today, we track a variety of crucial elements to get a holistic view of project health. For scope, we might track change request frequency. For quality, the right first-time rate. For safety, metrics like the lost time injury frequency rate. And for sustainability, things like waste diversion rate or embodied carbon tracking. These indicators must be SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. For example, a really poor KPI would be build a green building, but a SMART KPI? That sounds like achieve 90% waste diversion from landfills by Q4. You see the difference there? Much more precise. And finally, Section 5, securing written endorsement, the protocol for authorization. Ultimately, all of this incredibly rigorous groundwork has to culminate in a formal sanction process. Securing a written endorsement transforms a conceptual idea into an authorized, binding organizational commitment. As the literature beautifully notes, the project charter serves as the social contract between the project team and leadership. This is the exact moment that establishes the project manager's delegated authority to actually start spending money, allocating hours, and utilizing resources. Your project initiation document, or PID, needs to explicitly draw boundaries around your scope, detailing exactly what is included and, just as importantly, what is excluded to prevent any scope creep down the line. It must include approved budget reserves and a clear ROSI governance framework, showing exactly who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And this all culminates in a literal, formal signature from the project sponsor. Why? Because it creates a lasting accountability record that survives organizational changes, personnel shifts, and the test of time. So, let's quickly summarize what we've achieved today. We've mastered the needs assessment gap analysis, quantified the business case via total cost of ownership and the benefit-cost ratio, defined multidimensional SMART KPIs, and established the protocols for written endorsement. If you take away just one thing today, make it this. Doing this 5 to 10% of upfront work correctly reduces a massive amount of uncertainty, and it saves the other 90% of your project from chaotic, expensive course corrections. This kind of rigor guarantees incredible organizational agility and ensures your capital is always pushing toward your highest strategic priorities. I'm going to leave you with a rather provocative question today. Think about your own workplace. Are your initiation protocols treated as just an annoying administrative barrier, or are they the foundational safeguard for a high-performing reality? Seriously, are your organization's capital investments truly safeguarded by rigorous data, or are they still vulnerable to subjective gut feel? Here are the references we cited in today's explainer, which you can use to dive even deeper into these frameworks. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Mari Muthu, here on Bodhi Unified Flow. Apply these blueprints to your own work, and remember, always simplify complexity to amplify your performance. Until next time.